Everybody, welcome to Jam the Hype Live, where we help Christian urban artists effectively influence our modern culture to live lives transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. My name is George Moss. I am your host for Jam the Hype Live, joined by my co-host like every week, homegirl Cherie. What's going on, Cherie?
What's up? What's up? I am in a garage, which is my studio, and it's really hot here. So I'm kind of sweating, but suffering for the cause. But I have my electrolytes, my coconut water.
That's good. Man, how is it out there in California as you of course it's hot. It's hot everywhere. It's hot here in Michigan as well. But how things going as far as the lockdown and the I guess it's not a lockdown, but just even today, as I'm just kind of going out and still seeing like everybody in masks and things like this, is still just such a surreal experience to live in this world. I'm not sure. Maybe it just hits me. Maybe it's just hit me a little bit harder today. But
yeah, you've been through some things this week. But anyway, I think all of us are struggling mentally. I think being locked up, being masked all the time, and always having to be aware of just germs, which I've always been a germ freak, so this is nothing new to me. But I think for me, what's hard is not being able to be around people. So I'm an extrovert, and I get a lot of energy from people. So I've been feeling really lethargic. I don't know if any of you guys are feeling that out there who are extroverts. Holler at me if you're an extrovert and feeling a little bit like, man, I just don't feel right. So just trying to get my mental right and connect with friends as much as possible as I can over the phone, whether it be on Zoom or whatever. But I've definitely broken out a bit and started to do social distancing picnics with friends because I just need people.
Yeah, shout out to Tony over there in Manchester in the UK. Appreciate you tuning in from the other side of the world. It's feel like it's a worldwide thing, and I think more so than just the germ thing. I think it's just the mental reality of seeing everybody out just with their mouths covered. Like, it's not from a this has been I remember this there was Lupe Fiasco had this song like 10 years ago that he put out this song in this video of like everybody having masks on and just kind of like showing this, like, your voice is covered, you're silenced, you can't really talk about the truth that's going on in your world. And if you're spoken about, if you speak up to say anything, you're sort of attacked and kind of interrogated, put into your place, and like kind of re-indoctrinated to be following along with everybody else. And like that reality just sort of like hit me today as I was in a restaurant, and every single person had on a mask, and every single person was like social distancing, like, stay away from me. Everyone's scared of everybody. And it's just like, just understanding that we're in this world where I feel like we're just trying to be, where I feel like we're silenced. And just thinking about this idea of this artist way and what we're talking about as we're going through this book. And maybe I'm even a kind of a couple steps behind, and just feeling like the anger and frustration of of what we talked about last week. Even like the little cough. It's like, man, he's got the virus. It's just like, oh man. It's just a real reality of like the frustrated state that I feel like I'm in right now. And just and as we go and jump into this chapter, we've talked about this idea of dealing with anger and like listening to it in past episodes. And I feel like I'm just catching up to just really owning that. And like, yeah, I'm upset about some things, and I'm okay to be upset about these things. And how do I process that, and how do I respond to that? Maybe it's because I didn't get a chance to process that this morning doing my morning pages. So when I don't get that, maybe that's why I'm still a little bit on edge. But anyway, this idea of recovering the sense of what's possible. And I remember the first time I really had sort of this awakening to see what is possible. And I think we all have that in stages and certain events and experiences that happen to us. But I remember the first show that I ever had as a solo artist by myself. I used to be a part of this group called Live Animation, and we would, do shows and things like that around. But when I
are you sure you don't have the Rona? You can.
I'm sure.
Take a drink.
I don't have
water.
I need some water, but the water's over there, so I should have got that before we got on camera. But going out to perform for the very first time, I definitely don't want no nasty coconut water. You can keep it. I'm going out to perform for the first time as a solo artist, and I had some friends of mine sort of like gassing me up, saying that I'm going to be dope, and I'm performing. I'm opening up for this guy named John Rubin. Never heard of this guy before. Didn't know who he was. Didn't know anything about him other than like I get a chance to open up for him. What's up, Scott? I see you. Now I'm performing, and I do my set, and I thought that I did a great job. But then John Rubin comes up, and this guy literally commanded every single person in that crowd from the beginning to the end. I had never seen anything happen to where somebody could hop on stage and the entire audience was just zoned in on him. And it was at that moment, like, I was like, wow, I thought I got up there and did a good job when I just, said my verses and something like that. But it took it to a whole new level when I finally saw somebody actually, there was no like big lighting production. I mean, there was not even a big sound system. He didn't have a band. He had a DJ that was there with him. But man, he just like destroyed that show. And my mind was forever changed. I'm like, that's how you rock a show. That's how it's actually done. And you
Can I
don't know.
really quick? Who taught
Yeah.
me that?
What's that?
Can I share with you who taught me that?
Who taught you that?
You did. You're my John Rubin, George Moss.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
For real. All right, continue.
It's just one of those things. I never saw that happen in front of me. So once I saw that, my mind was blown to this whole new sense of possibility. And I mean, when we jumped into this chapter, kind of recovering the sense of possibility, I think we limit our own selves and our own abilities by not understanding what's actually possible, what's actually out there until we actually see what's happening. So I've just learned this week that I have some of my own sort of limiting belief systems that I have in my own way of that tell me that I can't do something. And so this week I was away with my wife, and I was having these conversations with my wife, and one particular conversation I was really having because I just had this like, I felt like she had this sort of limiting mindset. Now, in my mind, she had this limiting mindset that was keeping her from helping us to accomplish our goals or where we're trying to go with our lives. And I was really upset with her. And as I slept on it and I prayed about it and I woke up in the next morning and I started writing about it, I started to realize that limiting belief system that I was accusing her of having, it was actually me that was having that. Like a lot of those were, things of finances and where we want to go and how we want to get to a certain level of finances and what we need to do in order to get there and what sacrifices we need to make. And she's just saying like, some sacrifices I'm just not willing to make. I don't want to do, I'm not going to give up time, with family to go out and to do this because that's just, and I'm like, why are you doing that? And in my mind, I'm like, you're not willing to do what it takes. But in actuality, as I started to realize that it's not that in my mindset, it's not me not wanting to do what it takes to and work hard and make sacrifices. That's not the area that I struggle with. The area that I struggle with the most is having faith and trust in God that he's the one in control and he's actually doing something. So my mind this week was just blown to the possibility of like, that I'm actually connected with the creator of the universe. And it's not my work ethic. It's not my getting up at 5:30 in the morning and going to bed at midnight and doing everything that I possibly can to work so hard. It's not my own work that's going to reach me to anything. It's like, trusting God and knowing that I'm already where he wants me to be. It's not a goal that I need to achieve later. So that's just one area where my mind was blown just this week of like the possibility of like, well, not just not only the possibility, but the reality that God is in control, not me.
So I think you said something interesting. I believe that when we are in the place that God wants us to be, then we have to believe that he will come through to provide for us. And I think that sense of wanting to control and work super hard comes from a place of not believing that God is able to provide what we need and to take control of our situation. And so a story that comes to mind in my life of where I just really felt like God met me where I needed him, and just gave me some cushion, I guess you could say, as I was doing the work that he had called me to do. So there was a tour coming up, and I needed money to do that string of shows. So if you're an artist out there, I think you understand, you actually need money to go on the road. Like, you can't just go on the road and be like, all right, every show I'll get some money. No, you have to gas up the van. You know what I mean? You got to get the merch ready. You got to buy all the supplies. You got to pay your people. So I was like, man, how are we going to do this next string of shows? It was literally down to that space. And so I started praying, and it was around the first of the year, and I got a check in the mail. And I know we've all heard these stories, a check in the mail. But it was from a person that I knew who went to my church, and she gave me $5,000. She said, I was praying, and God told me that I'm to invest in your ministry. So that $5,000 check is what allowed us to do that next string of shows that God was calling us to do. And then on top of that, I was introduced to a wealthy philanthropist who said, what do you need? And I said, well, I need some merch. And he goes, all right, here's an open line of credit. So you just buy what you need, and then, take as long as you need to pay it back. And so that was an amazing thing. And the cool thing about that is I was able to buy the merch for the string of shows. I was able to fund the string of shows. And then when it came time to pay back for the merch we bought, he forgave the debt, the guy who gave the open line of credit. So I think for me personally, it's just like one of those things where I recognize that we have to do the work of obeying, and God does the work of providing. And so one of the comments that jumped out to me in this book this week was that receiving, not just doing, is an act of worship. Oftentimes we believe that everything we do is an act of worship, and that's it. But in this book, it said receiving is an act of worship as well. And I think that's absolutely correct. I think it spurs us on and allows us to be affirmed in the purpose we have and the work we are called to do. So that was an amazing experience. And I've just always gone back to that when I'm like, okay, like God can come through.
And this is one of those chapters in the book, and in just reliving and rehashing some of these stories, I'm very sensitive to like the whole sort of name it and claim it theology, like the whole God's gonna bless you, and there's just an abundance of everything, and all you got to do is have faith, and God's gonna do this for you. And like, I'm almost to the point where it's like, I'm so anti sort of that. I kind of like miss the blessing that God does have, because the reality is God he's not limited in what he can give. He's not limited in the amount of money that we can have, or the amount of things that he gets. But I mean, obviously it's not about those things. But also I have my own limiting belief system about God, because I'm so sort of jaded and anti some of those things, that I just miss out on the blessing of like, man, God does truly desire to give good gifts to his kids. Like, it's, have you ever like really gone out of your way to give somebody something, or put something together as a gift for somebody, you wanted to give that to them, and then they just kind of get that gift and it's like, oh, well, thanks, appreciate it, and then they can keep on going. Like, you're like, I wanted to see some sort of appreciation, some sort of like thank you, and I feel like we treat God that way sometimes, with not recognizing the gifts that he's already given us, and the possibility of like, do you not believe that I split the Red Sea? Do you not believe that I, fed 5,000 plus people with, 5 loaves and 2 fish? I mean, you're reading these stories, but if you don't believe that, like, you don't really have this faith that you claim that you have faith in. And that was one of those things that I just had to realize this week. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about this story that I remember reading as a kid. And it's a story of how they would, this kind of circus, the circus people that were like taming these elephants. And from the time these elephants were like babies, they would tie a rope to a chair and make sure that rope was tight so they couldn't break out of it. And that's how they trained these elephants as they were babies. And since they were trained that way since they were babies, by the time they get to be fully grown, 2 ton, I don't know how much elephants weighs, but they weigh a whole lot. they're very strong. They still put that same little rope and tie it to a plastic chair, and that the elephant doesn't move. It's chained to that chair, and it's chained to that belief system to saying that I can't break out of this mold because that's what I've always known. And as artists, I really feel like there's so many different things that we allow ourselves to have the same thing, where we just tie ourselves to what has been done and what we have been accomplished, and only things that we have seen. And that might work for somebody else, but that can't work for me. It's one, I really do believe that that's one of the major blocks that I personally need to get over with, not only as my journey as an artist, but my journey in faith in general, is to say that I'm not limited by what this world says I can and can't do. I'm not limited by the mask that I need to wear when I go and get a sandwich from Jersey Mike's. Like, it's one of those things. It's like, I'm starting to recognize all of the different limiting belief systems that I have, and slowly be able to kind of like weed those out. And it's a process of sort of uncovering those things. It talks about in this book of like finding the river, finding the flow. And it's not one of those things where it's automatic and it happens overnight, but you slowly find these different areas, and you sort of slowly kind of get them out of your life. And I'm trying to get that out of my life right now, to be able to uncover some of the things that have been holding me back.
Well, it sounds like you need a retreat, brother. Just one by yourself. I just got off one, actually. I went up to this Catholic retreat center in Malibu. I know that sounds really bougie, because it kind of is. But they actually allow people to come up there for a very low cost. And it's basically a space where you can have like a silent retreat. So it's really, really serene. And I actually had a terrible situation happen last week where I found out that my mother relapsed. So she's an addict. And so I felt like when that happened, the feeling of like, man, she was supposed to move here and we were going to have this great life for her. And then she chose to stop that. And then I felt like, man, like, how am I going to help her? And I really needed time to sit with the Lord and realize my own pain, my own inner child, and be like, man, that really hurt as a daughter. And then hear the Lord on like, what am I supposed to do as a daughter and as a leader to really honor her, even though she has this addiction. And so the Lord really spoke to me and unstuck me, and he brought me into that river, which that you're talking about, a free flow, where I felt stuck. I felt like I was grieving. And he just says, Cherie, look, the word of God says, make sure that you take care of the poor, honoring your mother. Here's the best way that you can honor her. Make sure she has shelter, make sure her medical needs are covered, and make sure she has food. And then I just felt like he was like, everything else you have no control over. And so you just need to let it go. And it was such a beautiful release. And I felt completely freed up to just let it go and just rest in the fact that, again, back to the idea of control, that God is in control and I can only do so much. He's only requiring so much of me, and what I can do is what I'll do. And so that was a beautiful time. And so in the book, she talks about recovery is the process of finding the river and saying yes to its flow, rapids and all. We startle ourselves by saying yes instead of no to opportunities. As we begin to pry ourselves loose from our old self-concepts or limiting ways, we find that our new emerging self may enjoy all sorts of bizarre adventures. And so going up to that Catholic retreat center was a bizarre adventure, to be quite honest with you, but it's where I found the river to really get unstuck from this tragedy, honestly, that happened in my family. So I think we all need times of retreat.
Yeah, absolutely.
The river.
Man, I didn't realize how much we needed those times of retreat, of just until the sort of this kind of pandemic starts to really set in. Because for me, I have a full house. We have 4 kids, a wife and a little chihuahua that runs around here. And there's always activity going on. And when I would get, to say the least, now when I'm on the road, I didn't realize how much of as an introvert myself, you're an extrovert and like you love
Mhm.
people. For me, I get energy by just being alone and getting a time to recharge. Um, and I didn't realize how much of those times where it's like I don't actually have to do anything. And it's not just being by myself, but
Mhm.
not having any sort of expectations. We're like all those times where I'm just sitting at the airport and no one's saying anything to me about being on my phone because I don't have any responsibility to talk to anybody. Like I can be on my phone and no one's going to say anything about it. Those times where, you know, I get out and I'm at the hotel by myself and I can just be there and just chill and not have the obligation to talk or to do anything like that. I never realized how much those times are needed to be rejuvenated
Yep.
um, until you don't have those anymore. Until you start to realize how much of you've been drained by having the responsibility to entertain or to talk. And now as an extrovert, you might get energy that way. I know for me, I needed those times to do
Mhm.
that. But one thing that I realized as I was thinking about just this kind of time of, you know, being in the pandemic and being alone and trapped in the house, well, with a bunch of people and just having this desire to be out on my own, I started to think about when Jesus, he wanted to be alone as well, but it was a different sort of alone that he wanted to be. He never really wanted to be alone to get away from the crowds for the sake of getting away from the crowds.
Mhm.
He wanted to be alone so he could be with his
With
father.
father. Yep.
And one of the things that I realized that is, so when you do get those times of just being alone and, you know, you're just alone with social media or you're alone with, you know, a book or you're alone with just your thoughts and your writing, those can be rejuvenating and be good. But the difference is, as a believer, is that we need those times to be alone with the Father. We
Yep.
need those intimate retreats to be alone with him, to be with the Creator, to really find what our purpose is, to be able to understand who we
Mhm.
really are, to be able to uncover some of those things. Because it wasn't until I got alone with the Father and started to pray and started to think about what was going on in my life this week, did he bring me to Matthew 6.
Mm.
And Matthew 6 is, you know, it's just talking about, you know, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added unto you. And I
Mhm.
started to think about that in terms of of finances and things like that. But
Mhm.
it wasn't just that. In fact, I want to just go ahead and bring that up. If you are in the comments or something like that, just go to Matthew 6. This is definitely one of those things that
Mhm.
uh that got me. You know, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life or what
Mhm.
you'll eat or what you'll drink, nor about your body or what you'll put on.
Mhm.
It's not life more than food, and the body more than clothing. And personally, I think Jim, you said something in the comments too. Like I grew up in a very poverty mindset, in a one of those where, you know, we didn't have a whole lot of money. And I hate to say poverty in America because I've been around the world and I've seen poverty for real. And
Mm.
you know, it's not poverty, since it's not World Vision, you know, Compassion International poverty. This is American poverty, where it's like you got to get your shoes from Payless and you got to use food stamps at the store. And I
Mhm.
mean, it's it's not like world poverty, but that's just a side note. But the point is, I've always had this feeling of lack, like there
Mhm.
was never enough. I've
Mhm.
always had the feeling like I had to go out and to do something in order to get to earn what I needed.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I spent time alone this week with God to realize that I've already taken care of you. I've already given you the gifts that you need, and you're not appreciating them. Like I've told you, I've given you this gift, and you are saying that it's not enough. And
Mhm.
that's convicted me really bad this week. That's my angelic alarms going off to say, man, that was good. That was my amen from my phone.
Mm.
But yeah, just kind of overcoming some of those limiting belief systems, especially as a believer. It's not about just name it and claim it. It's not about just saying, hey, whatever you think and positive thoughts, and you affirm yourself and you can do all these things. But the truth of the matter is that we truly do deserve or serve a God that cares for his children,
Yeah.
and he does provide. He has provided, not because of what we deserve in our own hard work, but because of what he's done already.
Yeah. And I think those that are listening, if you are an artist, you understand that right now it's a very difficult time. And I know, George, you're really, really struggling as you have lost your whole book of business for a year. and you have a family, you have kids to provide for, a wife to provide for, you have extended family to provide for. And so this idea of possibility, you have to reframe and rethink what your business is going to look like now in the middle of COVID, in the middle of 2020, in the middle of this whole cultural shift. And so I think if you're an artist out there and you're probably thinking the same thing, you know, we're just trying to point you back to the one who actually provides. And you got to get unstuck from doing things the way that you've done them in the past and let God speak a new vision to you. I believe that he can do that, and he's done that in my life. In fact, sometimes you just got to step out on faith as well. So I'm going to give you guys a story of stepping out on faith recently. One of the things I wanted to do was portray how I'm feeling during this crazy time via video. And I didn't have a script, but I had a feeling. So as I've been moving in the world, I've been like, man, I feel this way, I feel that way, but I haven't necessarily written down a script. So I hit up my videographer, Isaac Garcia, and I was like, Isaac, will you go out with me and just shoot me moving in the world the way that I normally do? So the places I normally go, to the beach to read, you know, downtown to look at the, you know, the political art that they're putting everywhere, at a city hall meeting, sitting by myself at a coffee shop. Just grab the images, because this is actually like what my life really looks like, and then I'll add the script later. Now, if you're an artist, like, you know, you ain't gonna bring a videographer out and not have a script. But we took a chance and let the river flow and just got the images and the visuals. And while I was away, again, back to my retreat and being alone, I was able to write the script. Like, it just came out like when it wanted to, when I gave myself space to write it all down. So now those pieces are together, and we're putting together this this video that honestly I feel is going to capture my heart and even the direction of where I want to lead beyond these last 3 months. So I've been enjoying just kind of like disrupting some of my normal ways of patterns and reimagining ways of doing art as I get unstuck and realize the possibility to do things that I haven't done before and do it in a new way. And I really believe that God will provide everything we need when we need it, right? The video came first. Usually that's not the way. The script came later. But I'm okay to like let God flip things up and just obey on like, all right, cool. And shout out to Isaac, because he was willing to go out and do that with me. So.
Yeah, shout out to Isaac.
It's been kind of wild and fun. So I'm kind of, again, back to that, you know, things are bizarre, and I'm just trying to embrace it and like be like, all right, God, how you gonna make this happen? You know, so.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I really loved about this chapter in this book and just this time is just realizing that, like, when we realize who we're really connected to, talking about this idea of recovering the sense of possibility, when you realize who we're connected to, anything is possible. And if we're looking back at how COVID hit and all the circumstances that led to where we are now, I'm saying for me personally, like, had Jam the Hype not come along and I decided to say, you know what, I normally would never take on a position like this because my schedule is too full. And for some reason or another, after you've been talking to me about this for what, like 7 months beforehand, 8 months beforehand, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. And then finally, when I say yes, it was a perfect timing to where God says, you're saying yes to this because I need you to be in this space for the time right now. And when your head is down and you're just looking at the day to day, you don't see those type of things. But when you look back and you start to see all the things that God has done, you start to realize, if you really want to recover the sense of what's possible, just look back to see what God has done already. Not only all the way back in scripture, thousands of years ago, but you can look back at 6 months ago and what he's done to bring you to where you are today, and know that even when times are hard today, he's only preparing you for the future because you know you can trust him. And he's a really, really good God. I'm really excited about what's happening with this show. I'm excited about Jam the Hype because it's going through a reconstruction process right now. And COVID has forced everybody into sort of this reconstructive process. And reading through this book and going through this process is one of those times that of right now that we need that I need as an artist myself, that we need as an organization, as a show. And as a ministry that we're doing, and I'm super excited that we're starting off going through this process just within our second season. So if you want to be a part of this process and dive even deeper with us each and every day, we would love to have you. If you are a rapper, singer, producer, if you're an artist, if you are a visual artist, a filmmaker, whatever artist you might be, any sort of creator that is creating content for the rest of the world as a ministry, we would love to have you be a part of the Jam the Hype Artist Development Group. Just shoot me a DM. I'll put a link in the description down here below, or in the comments here below, to have you join with us to talk to us each and every day about what's going on through this book as we go through this process, because this is definitely uncovering a lot of things that I needed to see to unblock a lot of the things that I know that he wants to have for us in the future.
Yeah. You bring up the show. I would just like to say that, what our vision for this show was in the beginning is completely different now, right? So I was like, all right, we're going to fly you in 7 times a year, George, and we're going to create a whole set that's going to look like the Breakfast Club. And we're going to have all these dope, guests and all these artists that we're going to bring on. But it became like, and we're going to record via Zoom, and we're going to stream via Zoom. And, it's kind of demoralizing, especially when your vision for something is so big. But I think you have to pivot, and you've got to recognize that God is building a new thing. And so I am excited about the new thing. And I think there's something in consistency that is being birthed. And you've talked a lot about this, like we must be consistent, and over time we'll get to where we want to be. So I appreciate your heart in that, George. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, comment. And next week we are going to be back with recovering the sense of abundance. And so abundance is going to be amazing. I've been also thinking through that. So excited to share that with you guys as well.
Yeah, next week's episode is going to be great, but also want to touch base with you before the next episode. So join us on Instagram, Talkback Tuesday at 3 p.m. We're going to get a chance to answer your questions, talk back, give you a little bit of update. And of course, we'll be talking every single day in the Jam the Hype Artist Development Group. So thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you guys again next week. Peace.